Nick, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. The first question I've always asked people on when I interview them is guilty pleasure of theirs, but I'm actually changing it.
Okay.
To more of fit the podcast in its style. And is this too loud?
I'm good, man.
Okay. Let me just turn it down a little bit. Okay. And so the new question that I want to ask is what makes your heart sing? What makes you happy? Like, what is that thing that makes your heart just totally feel full?
Man, that is a fantastic way to open this thing up. I think for me, it has really been ever since I became a dad, just having that little human that is half me, half my wife. And she is the goofiest cartoon character, like little girl. And she's 20 months. And she's just full of joy and full of love and full of just energy, lots of energy. So like, it just makes my heart sing for like those, Sunday mornings, Saturday mornings. Like usually Saturdays, I spend the entire day with her because my wife's a makeup artist and she does wedding makeup all of Saturday usually. So that's usually our daddy-daughter day. So it just makes my heart sing to just sit with her and watch her grow and watch her evolve and just be her silly little self. Like I always told my wife before we started having kids, because if you watch my wife's childhood, like home movies, my wife's just off the wall, just nuts. And in a good way, like very silly, very funny. I'm like, When we have kids, like that's what I want. And I got what I wanted in a big, big way. So she's become the center of our world, and she definitely makes my heart sing.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah. I'm right on the same page. My kids. So I totally understand that. I just saw, I was scrolling through your Facebook page and stuff, and I saw how you worded, how you get to, I don't remember exactly how you said it, but you said you get the opportunity, you get the beautiful blessing to spend an entire day with your kid. As you were meditating, you were thinking that thought was coming in your head.
Sure.
Whereas some people might pop in their head like, oh, I have so much stuff to do. I have to, it's going to be great being with my kid, but I have so much other stuff to do. But I think that what you do, and you have a book on this, you have a podcast about this stuff, is your mindset of how to have different perspectives and different views, and how to word stuff so that your mind is in a better place, I guess, right?
Sure.
So how do you use mindfulness? Okay, we all know that term. It's been thrown around like crazy. How do you use that on a daily basis, whether it's daily habits, activities with your kids? I mean, whatever. Where do you incorporate mindfulness day to day?
So I would say in the general scope of things, I try to, as best as I possibly can, be very clear about what's a means and what's an end. Like everything that you were just kind of discussing in terms of like what a typical person probably does when they have a day dedicated to spend with their kid, or, whatever, they start rattling off all the things that they have on their to-do list. Yeah, of course, we're all humans living in this capitalist world where we have to do things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But most, if not all, of those things that we are choosing to do are a means to an end. And that end usually is, the freedom to do what we want to do, or to spend more time with our family and provide for our family and things like that. So like when it comes specifically to spending a day with my daughter is the end. Like my family is the end, and all of the things on my to-do list are just a means to that. And so often we get caught up in, I have to do all this stuff. But we sometimes are able to cut out the middleman and say like, oh, all of this stuff is in purpose of helping me take care of my family, and my family's right in front of me. What am I doing? And so like I catch myself sometimes in that loop too. I wake up on a Saturday morning, which it's a wide open day in terms of tasks, but half my mind's like, oh, I could be working on my business right now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I could do this right now. I could work on the podcast. I could, start writing another book, whatever. And then it's like, oh, but your daughter's also available, and you'd be doing all of that stuff so that she would have a good life. Why don't we just start there? So it's the mindfulness aspect of that is just checking myself and kind of finding the awareness in the moment of when my mind starts reeling towards, I got to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
What are we doing all that stuff for? And really separating the means from the end. Like the money that we're trying to make is a means to the end of providing for your family. The vacation that we want to take is a means to the end of feeling freedom. And, your relationship is a means to the end of feeling loved. Like all of the things that we think we have to spend hours and hours and hours of our life doing. Yeah. We're, my co-host on my podcast loves to say, like, we were born with opposable thumbs. We're here to do stuff. Like, that's what humans are. So yeah, we are here to take action and fire off things that we go on a, crush in this world. But at the end of the day, like, what is the end of that? Is it to spend more time with your family? Is it to have freedom in your life? Is it to feel loved? Because all of those ends are often much more in reach than we think. We think that we have to go and do this stuff for 20 years and then we get to finally experience the end of it. But like sometimes the end is a 20-month-old little girl staring back at you and saying, like, Daddy, I want to run around the house today. Cool. All right. I'll put the podcast down for a few hours and I can do that. Because the means and the ends are very separate in my mind, at least. I try to be. I'm human, so I'm not perfect. But,
right.
You know what I mean? Like that's kind of
perfect.
How I view it is like, why am I really doing this?
Yeah.
And then I come back to, the end is right in front of me.
The end is right. Yeah. So what you're saying is, use those times when you're aware of that to just be in that moment with them, because you're going to have to do that work and that stuff anyway. Yeah. But she's right here. Your wife's right here. Why not just enjoy it while it's right there?
Right.
In the moment. Right.
Yeah.
That's good. And I think that you're able to do that in your own mind because you have a daily meditation practice, right?
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm.
What does that look like?
So recently, I have really come into this place where when things are kind of showing up from different angles and I start to sense that maybe I should kind of dive in, whether they be big or small, I'm like, okay, I've heard it a couple times. I should trust it. Like it's showing up for a reason. So recently I've, through like stuff that I've been reading or videos I've been watching, podcasts I've been listening to, just influences outside of myself, have been talking a lot about how powerful meditation is. And I've been meditating roughly daily, like 98% of my days, probably for like 3 years.
Wow. Awesome.
And recently I've been reading Joe Dispenza. I don't know if you've read any of his stuff. I've been listening to a lot of Kyle C stuff, and he's like right up my alley in terms of the things that he talks about. And they're both like just hammering on how powerful meditation is for like lengthy amounts of time.
Oh, okay.
And how like once you sink into it and actually catch the present moment rather than letting your mind race. And it's part of the process. Your mind's going to race. It's going to be there. But when you give yourself a good amount of time, eventually you kind of bypass all the noise and you just sink into it. And so Kyle Cease was talking about, I meditate for an hour every morning. I'm like, okay, that was a lot of time. And then Joe Dispenza was saying like, 45 minutes to an hour. And then Kyle Cease also mentioned that Mr. Rogers used to meditate for 2 hours before every single episode that he did. And so I'm like, wow, okay. So two people that in real life right now I admire, and Mr. Rogers, obviously a great guy.
Yeah.
They meditated for a long time. So literally last week, I was like, okay, I'm going to wake up a little bit earlier and I'm going to meditate for an hour from Monday through Friday. So unguided, no guided meditation. It's just like I put on some ambient sound in the background into my headphones and just put a timer on for an hour. So I did that Monday through Friday last week. I meditated for 45 minutes this morning, and then I'll go back to an hour tomorrow. And I tell you, man, it's an interesting wrestling match with my mind that I didn't anticipate. I figured like after I got past the 10, 15 minutes that I'm used to, I'd be like, okay, I'm back in this moment. But what happens is once you get past what your body has been accustomed to, now your mind, like my mind was like, whoa, this is longer than usual. What are we doing? And then it just starts becoming this internal wrestling match, like I said. And then after that kind of wave of things, it does settle into like a place of stillness that it's crazy. Like it's not euphoric. Wasn't like seeing anything or anything. Right.
Are you anticipating being done a lot? Because I'm used to the 10, 15 minutes, and I do want to experience longer. I just I haven't made that commitment to do that. Right. So I'll do 10, 15 in the morning, and then I've been actually adding an afternoon 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock time frame. Okay. Where I throw another 10 or 15 minutes in.
Cool.
Right.
I like that.
And that's what I enjoy doing, but I haven't dive in. I think 45 minutes I've done once. But anyway, so are you anticipating during that meditation, like, all right, is this over yet? Does that happen?
Sure. Yeah. It's
curious.
I would say probably every increment of time that my body's used to.
Yeah.
Every 10 to 15 minutes. Like, okay, every 10 to 15, like, oh, it's probably done soon. Or like, I'll find myself asking the question, I wonder how long I've been doing it.
Yeah.
How close it is. Because the reason that my mind is doing that, my ego's like talking to me is because like, oh, we have all this stuff to do on the other side of it.
Yep.
But then I also remind myself, like mid-meditation, like, dude, you carved out this hour so that you could just sit here.
Yes.
You're not doing it all like willy-nilly. Like you didn't choose to wake up late and then do an hour and then try to rush to work. Like you got up early so that you could just be here. So just sit and be here.
Yep.
And it's been interesting, and I look forward to kind of continuing the challenge, and something that Kyle Cease has talked about. And one of the reasons that I really wanted to commit to it, he's like, you sit with yourself for an hour, there's going to be stuff that comes up. And so many of us want to take the stuff that comes up and like push it back down. But like that is the stuff that you're here to address and you're here to work through. And it's not going to be tragic or crazy traumatic or anything. It's just like different little patterns and beliefs that maybe have been so far under the surface that you haven't spent enough time to let them come up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I haven't had anything huge come up. There was the one last week, one question came up in the middle of the meditation, was like, what are you really afraid of? And I was like, oh, this is an interesting question to hear at 5 a.m. So I waited till the end of the meditation to kind of journal on it. And it was interesting because the question seems big, but then I wrote it down. I'm like, what am I afraid of? And it turned out I was just afraid that I wouldn't be enough for my wife and my daughter. And then I'm like, okay, so is that true? Well, what are you doing right now? Like, of course you're enough. Like you're taking care of business, you're taking care of yourself, so you can take care of them and all of that. So you can kind of whittle your way through all of the stuff that your mind wants to tell you you're not good at or you're not good enough for.
Right.
Because when you put it on paper, you're like, oh, that's kind of silly. I'm fine. And that kind of relieves you of that weight that was on your shoulders. So I do have a meditation practice. And right now we're doing an hour a day, Monday through Friday. On the weekends, I'll kind of go for maybe 20 minutes to a half hour.
Okay.
But it just gives me, because I think that the thing about meditation is people think that I'm going to come out of a meditation as a different person. And I don't think that's the case. It's just that you are training your body to have a different baseline of like peace. Because I've had moments where I know prior to meditation, things would trigger me and I would just kind of fly off the handle. Not in like a crazy way, but just easily get sucked into whatever that circumstance is. Yep. And then after meditating for a few years, like those same exact moments that used to trigger me, I'd be like, this is interesting.
That's how it triggers you now.
Right. This is an interesting thing that person said, or like, that's weird how I may have used to see what they said is about me or whatever. So you just have a different like baseline or like a buffer between yourself and what you used to get triggered by, and it kind of just settles you into a place like, oh, this isn't really all that bad. I'm fine. Yeah,
I love that. That's awesome. And there was a lot there, Nick. So that was well said. Well, and first off, because you are doing that, you've officially inspired me. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to get up earlier and I'm going to do an hour till Friday.
I look forward to hearing that.
Well, I was for about 6 months straight, I was getting up at 5 a.m. every day, doing a morning routine and all this stuff. Yeah. But we're all humans, right?
Sure.
So all these coaches, life, quote unquote, gurus, a lot of them, not all of them, a lot of them will make it seem like they're always on 24/7.
Sure.
They're doing everything right. They're doing every morning, they're doing their routines and they're just crushing life, right?
Yeah.
Well, so that's how when I first started doing this, that's what I saw, that's what I felt. So I'm like, that's what I need to do.
Yeah.
So I crushed it, right? And mildly obsessive. And I have a lot of people that are around me that will tell you that.
Sure.
And I'm sure you went through a similar phase.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
But then you figure out your, I don't want to say comfort zone, but you figure out what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And then you also realize that you're human, right? So for the past month, I won't lie, I have, for the past 9-10 months, I don't think I've missed more than one day, if a day, maybe here and there, meditating, right?
Yeah.
And journaling and stretching and doing my morning stuff.
Yeah.
For the past month, I've missed several.
Sure.
And it had business trips, my dog going missing. Yeah. It's just life will throw you curveballs.
Of course, yeah.
Right? So I just wanted to bring up that, and you meditating for a long time and doing life. You call yourself a life coach? Would that be a good term? I know these, the word.
You can call it whatever you want. Basically, I help men get out of their own way. But yes,
that's what we're going to talk about next.
Sure.
So I just wanted to touch on that we're all human, and these, like, you try different things. Like for me, for example, people might listen to this and think, oh, that guy, he must meditate all the time. He must do long lengths of meditation. And no, honestly, I've mainly keep it to 10 to 15 minutes.
Right.
And to hear you go do an hour, I've actually almost been sort of like scared to go an hour to see what really is going to happen.
Well, that's the thing. Like there might be some stuff that comes up, but at the same time, it's not. You're still safe. You're still fine.
Yeah.
It's just that it's a challenge to your ego, because your ego is so used to like driving forward and doing stuff that like 10 to 15 minutes without doing anything is like basically stabbing your ego in the heart, because it's so used to like driving forward and doing stuff, going to the gym, writing in your journal, doing whatever you need to do for your business.
Yeah.
Like it just is so obsessed with having something to do, when you're just like, let's click off for an hour. It's like, wait a second, I would like to do something. And then it just flows things to the surface. And those things are what you need to work on. It becomes like it becomes your homework, that it comes up like, oh, okay, that question needs to be answered. I'll figure that out.
Well, expect a message from me on Friday. Be like, all right, here's what happened. How did you experience this? How did it felt?
Yeah, sure.
Because, you're new to the hour. I'm going to be brand new to the hour. So that's cool. I'm going to definitely do that. I don't know if I'll be able to stick with it or want to. I'll see.
Right. Yeah. Just feel it out.
But we're going to do it.
Nice.
I do want to eventually do a full retreat. Have you ever thought about doing like a 3-day or 7-day silent retreat sometime in your life?
I have not thought about it. I've heard of them, and they all sound interesting to me, but I think similar to what you were just saying about like having an hour, it kind of scares you, like what's going to come up in that time. I think 3 days of silence would be beneficial, but at the same time, there's going to be a lot of fear that needs to be worked through before I would commit to that. Because if you're not talking, you're just listening to yourself. And, an hour of meditation is a lot, but 3 days of only listening to your thoughts, of course, it's beneficial, as most things like that kind of scare you internally. On the other side of them, that you get the benefit of like some kind of growth, but I would have to work through some stuff to commit to that for sure.
I feel you. So where was I going with that? Because you said so I actually read a quote recently. It was like, if you can't find 10 minutes of time for yourself to meditate or whatever, just be silent, then you need to do it for an hour.
Right.
Which was an interesting perspective, right?
Yeah,
just get up earlier.
I've heard somebody say like, if you're the person that's kind of rubbing back and have resistance to me telling you to meditate for a while, you're the person that needs to do it the most.
Perfect.
Because it's like, this is the work that is showing up for you, and like you need to honor it and just try it and see what happens.
So let's shift to your I have my phone out here reading Leader of Heart-Centered Men, 1-to-1.
Yeah.
I'm just going to leave this open. Elaborate on this.
Yeah. So recently, I've been coaching guys for, I don't know, maybe 3 years now. But with becoming a dad, I still teach high school math. And so the windows of time that I have for coaching are quite limited, because I do want to be a family man. I want to be present for my daughter and hang out with my wife when she's available. And I don't want to just say like, all right, I get home from school, I'm going to close the door and go coach for 4 or 5 hours, and then I'll see you guys at bedtime.
Yeah.
That's not the guy that I want to be. So I was looking at the way that there was a kind of a ceiling to the way that my coaching model would work, right? I have these 1-to-1 clients. We have weekly calls. So in the way that I wanted to operate within that, I could only take on like 5 or 6 guys. And although that would bring in some substantial supplementary income for my family, the goal for me is to kind of transition to full-time coaching. And for me, it needs to be a place where like financially, I've at least matched my teaching salary before I, make my exit.
Okay.
So like numbers wise, time, money, like I saw this ceiling based on the model that I was coaching in. Mm. So this 1-to-1 model came up to me, 1 being the number 1, and then the other 1-to-1 would be like victory 1. So that idea kind of came through me via a meditation. I was just kind of meditating, like, wow, that would be interesting.
So many ideas come up when we're meditating, don't they?
Yes, yes.
And then if you journal on them, you remember them and they can stick. It's really cool.
Yes, I agree.
Brings out a lot of creativeness in you when you're meditating.
Okay,
sorry to interrupt.
No,
Go
you're
ahead.
good. So it came through me when I was meditating, and like you said, I journaled about it. And what's funny is when something comes through us with meditation or just like a creative idea, you put it on paper like that would be really cool. And there's like this intense feeling like this would be awesome. And then after that, there's a lot of rationalizing and logical thinking that gets kind of heaped onto that sometimes we just talk ourselves out of it, right? So this idea came through me and I wrote it down and I made this conscious choice. I'm like, I'm not going to talk myself out of this. I'm just going to see where it goes and just toss it out and see what happens. So the concept basically is rather than having weekly calls with the guys that I coach, I'll have monthly calls. So once a month, I'm going to coach these guys via the same way that I would have, usually a video chat. And we just sit and kind of work through whatever's coming up for them. We kind of set foundations and intentions, kind of figure out the lens that they want to live their life through. So the way that I kind of coach is figuring out their emotional drivers. So, I ask them what they want, what's their goals, what their bucket list looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And then we kind of extract from that, what is the emotion that's tied to all of this? Like if you want to go on a bunch of vacations, it's probably freedom that you really, really want. If you want to find your partner, that's probably love that you've been seeking. So we kind of use those as a way to view life and set our goals and set our intentions. Because if we can experience freedom and love and joy and all of that in a way that's intentional, we don't have to wait for the partner or the vacation or the business plan or whatever. So that's kind of the way that my calls usually go. So I'm like, all right, well, instead of weekly calls, we'll do monthly calls. So that frees up my time. Now, how can we also still support them in that month? Because I don't want to just talk to them once a month and be like, all right, well, good luck.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you in a month. So I was actually talking to a prospective client and he was like, hey, have you used Marco Polo or like Voxer? Because it's just like a quick video back and forth. And he was a busy guy. I'm a busy guy. He's like, maybe we could like do that. And he actually didn't end up working with me in the formal one-to-one format. But his idea kind of was like, okay, maybe this is the way that I can make this monthly support makes sense. So I would, have that call with them once a month. Then they have access to me every single day through Marco Polo. So
cool.
My 6 clients that are going through this program right now, we already had our first call and then they just hop on to Marco Polo as needed. Some of them, they're talking to me every day. Some of them talk to me every couple days, whatever.
Right.
Whether it be something they want to celebrate, something that they need a little feedback on, they'll just hop in and be like, Nick, this is what's going on. I'm having a little bit of resistance. Like, what do you think I should kind of shift towards? And basically I get to readjust them in the moment and almost have like mini coaching sessions with this little app called Marco Polo.
Yeah.
So the guys that have been doing that are like, this is really cool because I only have to sit down and have like a formal thing on my calendar once a month with you, but then I can reach out to you whenever I feel resistance, whenever I feel like there's pushback from myself or, my job or my relationship. Like you're always there, like in my pocket, because I can just pull up Marco Polo and speak to you. And with the time freedom for me, because I only have, I still have my traditional formal one-to-one clients that I'm speaking to every week.
Mm-hmm.
But, if this is the model that can help that time freedom for me, I can now see that, I can get more clients in the door and have a bigger impact. I can...
and you can respond to them when you have the time to respond to them.
Right. So it just gives me a little bit more freedom, them a little bit more freedom. And it's been really, really cool to work through with the guys. And since they're not, talking to me every week in a formal sense, it's a lower price point because, it's thousands of dollars to work with me, in that very official capacity of working weekly.
Right.
If they're only talking to me once a month, it's still valuable, but they're not getting that hour with me every week. So they don't have to invest as much money. So the person that, like I was when I first started this process of working on myself, I didn't have the thousands and thousands of dollars to invest in a coach. Like it just wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
So I would look for an option that would make sense for me and my family. Like it was always family money I was spending, and there's so many guys that are husbands and fathers that are in the same boat. They're not just single dudes ready to throw cash at a coach. So it's been really cool because guys that have had interest in the past of working with me have always had resistance to the amount of money that they were going to pay. I'm like, okay, well, eventually I'll find something that's going to work for me.
Yeah. I love it.
And out of the 6 guys that have committed to it, I think all of them have reached out in some capacity, like in the last year or so. And then this price point just made sense to them. They're like, okay, finally I get to work with Nick and I don't have to break the bank to do so. So it's been really cool to offer something that's a win for them because they don't feel like they're throwing money at something that they don't really know what's going to come.
I think
you're fine.
I think I wanted to bring this up before I lost my mind here. But I think what's really cool that you're doing is you have a kid, you have a relationship with your wife, and you're also being a coach. A lot of times, and this isn't a knock or anything, but a lot of coaches that I've researched, that I've gone and looked up, a lot of them are single, whether it's male or female. Yeah. Like it's true. Or they're in maybe a relationship, right? So I would like to work with somebody, if it was me personally, that's going through a similar life situation as me.
Sure.
Right? Or has gone through a very similar life, progression as I would. I would almost be like an interview to figure out who I was going to work with. Sure. Because it's easy to coach somebody if you've not easy, but like I feel like you need to have gone through a lot of stuff that they've gone through, not personally, but like just in life in general.
Sure.
If I'm trying to coach if I'm a single dude, 24 years old, and I party every now and then, and I'm freely having sex all the time with different women, and I'm trying to coach a male that has two kids, one's a newborn, married, working on his relationship with his wife that's struggling a little bit. He's not sure if he wants to stay in the job he has because he has this passion to do something else. I can coach him, but I don't think I'm gonna be able to do it as efficiently as I should be. So you're the type of person where if somebody has that kind of stuff going on, that's perfect fit, right? And even if they don't, you were single at one time, so that's cool that you can have all those dynamics.
Yeah, no, it's something that I've experienced from the other side of the table as someone who is invested in coaching. We were talking a little bit before we hit record here that I've had, kind of three main coaches in my time of working on myself. Intermittently. And the first coach that I had, Tommy Baker, loved him to death, like great guy. And he offered so much value to me that I didn't understand and conceptually get before working with him. Like he was a guy that was like, all right, morning routine. You're going to get up at 4:30 or 5 in the morning and you're going to do X, Y, and Z so that before the day begins, you've knocked all of these things off of your list. You've meditated, you've read, you've worked out. And that way you can go out into the world and not feel like you're a little bit less whole because you're waiting for that time for yourself. You've created it in the morning. And that was like, he was, kind of at the basis and the foundation of me creating that meditation habit. Cool. But along the way, like my time working with him at the time, I wasn't really thinking about being a life coach. I was just a guy that was reading a lot of personal development stuff. I had a blog and I was like, how can I make an impact? And that kind of rolled into me being a coach and everything. But in my process of becoming a coach, I would look at Tommy, who was kind of my template of what coaching life looked like. And although he had a lot of great ideas and was an amazing dude, wasn't married, didn't have kids. I'm like, okay. So that my soul, my heart was like, okay, like I want to do what Tommy's doing, but if that's the template that I'm working with and that's what I'm seeing, there's a part of me that doesn't think that's for me anymore because he doesn't have the same circumstances that I have. And so eventually Tommy and I, parted ways and didn't work together anymore. And then I moved on to this guy, Preston Pugmire, also a great dude. But he has 2 kids. I'm like, okay, so it's starting to fit the bill of my life. Like it's more of a reflection of who I am and who I want to be, and learned a lot from Preston and everything. And then I eventually moved on to this other coach, Nick Tilia, who's a former teacher. And like I was saying before, like I'm looking to transition out of teaching in the next 3 to 5 years or so. So he's a former teacher. His business is amazing. He's living he's got 4 kids. He's got 4 kids. And the way that he lives just so wide open, like I admire that so much about him. And just every coach that I've invested in I found more and more that I either have in common with, or they are showing me the template of what I want to create.
What makes you switch? Some like me, I'm
sure.
I'm the type of person that has to like change my guided meditation apps like all the time. I have like 6 of them that I've downloaded just because that's my personality, right? I can't just do the same thing over and over. So is that the reason why you've switched coaches, or you just were like, oh, I want to see if this person's a better fit? What is the reason for that?
So with a couple of different so with Tommy's program, for instance, it was like an 8-week program.
Okay.
And it was more of like a group program. So there was an end point to
Yeah.
it. And I could have reinvested if I wanted to, but I was like, I feel like I've learned a lot here and I want to kind of work through that on my own for a bit. So there was a little bit of a gap between Tommy and then Preston. Preston, for me, when I got into Preston's program, I was just kind of looking for support again. It wasn't like I was looking for a specific coach or anything. I just saw in Preston a bit of more of a reflection of me. So I hopped into his program, and it was also a group program. And I, through the process, I could feel myself growing, kind of expanding. My business was growing and everything. And I looked at the other people that were in the group, and I still have a very soft spot in my heart for that group. But I could tell that I was kind of outgrowing it in a sense. Like the people that were there were working through some admirable stuff, but I knew that I already kind of learned that lesson for myself,
Yeah.
So in the process of working with Preston, I saw the opportunity to work with Nick, and I knew that Nick would challenge me in a way that maybe this other group wouldn't be able to. And it's not a knock on Preston at all. It was just, the people that were in that group that he was coaching weren't experiencing the same things that I was in life.
Totally.
So it was just kind of like a changing of the guard. And Preston completely understood. He's like, I'm glad that you're taking this leap, and I'm sad to see you go, but I know that this, like I was saying, like, I know that this person in this new program that you're going to dive into is going to be a game changer for you, just because you are conscious of, like, you've hit your ceiling here. Like, you know that you're ready for more. So it's always kind of been either just a specific program ending, or just that feeling like, I think I've overstayed my welcome.
Yeah.
And then moving on to the next guy.
Well, I mean, from my perspective, we haven't met in person yet. I've just talked to you on Facebook a couple times.
Sure.
Your wife has done some makeup for some good friends of mine.
Yeah.
But from my perspective, I'd see a bright future for you, like 100%. Like, if anybody out there listening and is looking for a coach and a mentor of some sort, Nick would be the guy to go to for sure, or at least talk to and see if it's a good fit. And like, where could what's your website again, where they could find you?
So my website, I would even say, like, maybe not the best place to
Okay.
find me, because I don't use it very often. I used it very heavily. Like,
I'm the same way, so I get it.
Yeah, so the website is movingpastmediocre.com. Moving Past Mediocre is also the title of my book. So if you're a book nerd and you like to read, go grab that on Amazon. But usually on Instagram, I'm most active. So it's Nick_Moving Past Mediocre. If you look on Facebook, you can find me. It's Nick Matiash, and my name does not sound like it spells. So it's Matiash. If you look over on Facebook, you can find me there. But yeah, those are the main outlets that you can look out and find me in the world. Yeah.
What's Matiash? What's the background there?
It is Russian. Yeah. So I believe when my ancestors of whatever kind came over, it probably looked a lot different too, but they chopped it up to make it look more Americanized. And I would assume that somebody that was in my family line could not pronounce it for themselves, because if you look at the word in my name, like, no, not even close to Matiash. If you, in fact, switched the T and the I in my name and made it Maitash, it would make sense for Matiash. But, my name always gets butchered.
Matiash or something.
Yeah, I just come to expect it at this point. It's like, okay, you're going to mess it up, and that's okay. Let me help you out.
Have you done like the 23andMe or anything like that to see where your background is?
I have not. Funny story.
You probably should.
That, so a client of mine who's been working with me for a year and a half, like he's put out this blog, and like, shout out to Dave Barry if you're watching or listening.
Oh, I know Dave Barry.
Yeah, okay, yeah, he's a Rochester dude. Have you been watching what he's been posting on Facebook?
Yeah.
So he's a client of mine. He's been my longest client that I've had.
Cool.
But that whole story about his biological father not being his dad, insane, right? And it was all because of like Ancestry.com. He just went on out of curiosity, and turns out like he has a sperm donor father, and like has all these half brothers and half sisters for him.
At 35 years old, figure out that, or 33, you figure out that your dad is not actually your biological dad, and now you have some stuff to work through.
Right. And I mean, it was 6 months after he had found out that he reached out to me, and we started working together. It was on our first call.
Wow.
He was telling me all about like what he wanted to do with his business and everything, and just like he was about to get married, I think, at the time. And then towards the end of the call, just very nonchalantly, he's like, oh, and also 6 months ago, I found out that my dad is my dad. So that might be something that we should talk about. I'm like,
he's great.
Maybe we should kind of lean into that a little bit more. Sure.
He's a brilliant writer. When I read that whole article, I've read a bunch of his. He's good. I like Dave.
Yeah. No, he's a good dude. It's funny. My wife introduced us prior to the whole coaching thing. She didn't introduce us. She was like, you should be his Facebook friend because I think that you guys would be best friends. You just both like Boys to Men and NSYNC, but also like aggressive rap songs. Like you guys seem like a very similar type of human being.
That's funny.
So go ahead and friend him. And then after he friended me or I friended him, he would just kind of watch what I was putting on Facebook and like kind of gravitated towards it and then eventually reached out. And we had a conversation about coaching. And now I've been working with him, I don't know, like a year and a half. Yeah.
Cool.
But he's seen a lot of growth. It's been really cool to watch. That the whole Barry Chronicles thing, but also his business has been popping too. So
that's sweet. You said boys confession. I was actually haven't said this before, but I was actually in a boy band in high school.
You were. This is
called
amazing.
The Boys, and we did NSYNC and Backstreet Boys songs, and we performed them at the dances. And this is true. It lasted about a year and a half, and then I let myself go. I got picked on too much for it.
So this is like a legitimate thing. You guys would perform places and rehearse and everything.
Oh, we rehearsed like crazy. Yeah, a lot of rehearsal, and it actually went on for like 3 years. The band kept going. It was just a local high school thing.
Boys.
The Boys.
That's amazing. What episode is this? We're coming up on. We're coming out of this shell of this boy band past.
So funny. My wife remembers going to our performance for sure. She would tell you all about it because I went to high school with her.
That's incredible.
But yeah, so that's.
I hope we can tag on some footage of that on the end of this episode.
I probably should. I have some somewhere.
That would be incredible.
So actually, speaking of that, of getting picked on or whatever, you're the leader of Heart-Centered Men, right? So we're talking about emotions, feelings, a lot of that.
Yeah.
Your core group of friends,
yeah.
Do they ever bust your chops and give you, like mess with you a little bit about things?
Yeah. I mean, I think the reason that I want to coach men and the reason I do coach men is because I feel like guys, in terms of like male relationships with each other, there's not a safe space to talk about how you really feel, whether it's like you're sad or you're really, really excited about something. It's usually just, let's keep it normal. Let's talk about our fantasy football team.
Right.
And, we'll complain a little bit about our wife. And then, we'll talk about other random things, maybe work a little bit, complain about that. That's kind of the norm, right? So when I was getting into the coaching game, I was like, I want to really make a safe space for guys to come and talk about stuff that means something to them, because that's where we grow. And I certainly wasn't like that in full when I was living back home where my core group of friends are.
Of course, we changed.
So yeah, I moved out to Rochester about, it's been 5 years.
Okay.
So I moved out here for my wife, Christina. And prior to that, like when we got married, I had 9 groomsmen. So there was a
big wedding,
good crew of guys, and I wouldn't get picked on extensively, but like everybody knows that I'm like the sap of the group. I'm the hopeless romantic. Like they know that when it comes to like what my life is about, it's about my wife and my daughter, and like they give me all the feels, and they'll give me a hard time about it every once in a while. In our group of friends, there is. For a while there, it was just me and my best friend Tom, who were the ones that were married. I had a kid first. Tom just had a kid this past year.
How old were you when your daughter was born?
I was.
So it's a couple years ago.
I think it was right before I was 30.
Oh, okay.
I think maybe I was 30.
Yeah.
So yeah, like we were at the front end of all of that stuff in my group of friends. But as we mature, they've gotten less and less critical of how that plays out in my life, and I've also gotten much better at like, I really don't care what you guys think of me.
Yeah.
Like I think in my early to mid 20s, like I tried to put on a front. I would definitely not talk about the things that I'm talking about now. And I honestly think that the physical distance, the tangible distance between where I grew up and where I am now, it makes it a lot easier to kind of lean into these things that I've been learning about myself and just like working on all the things that I want to create in life. I think if I was still there and had this group of friends that I still do love very much
of course,
around me all the time, they would just remind me of the guy that was trying to protect himself and protect his ego and just his self-esteem.
That's interesting.
So
isn't
like
it?
Having that physical gap has been helpful in that sense. I mean, I miss kicking it with him all the time, but I also know that I wouldn't be the guy that I am if I was still hanging out with them like every night, going to have beers and stuff.
Yeah, I had this lady girl, Susie Yoloff Schwartz, on my podcast. She owns Unplugged Meditation out in LA.
Okay.
And she's like the first ever meditation studio ever opened.
Oh, okay.
And I asked her that question too, about like, you know, how you're able to surround yourself with such good people. And like, she's around the top guru, the top meditators, the top life influencers, everything.
Yeah.
And she goes, well, when I moved from, I believe it was New York to LA.
Yeah.
She goes, I almost put that life, I was able to start a brand new life.
Right.
And at that time was my transition that I was trying to make in my life and figure out what I wanted to do and who I wanted to become. So it was so much easier for me to separate. She's like, I still love all the people that I was friends with and were there. But so, and the reason I asked that is just because, you know, I've been in Rochester, born and raised in Rochester. So there's a lot of reminders of the old me.
Sure.
A lot.
Yeah.
You know, and I go to an event and it's all, you know, it's crew, which I love dearly. And I'm friends with, we're just in we're in different positions in life,
sure,
you could say. You know, like for example, I was at a wedding about a year ago or so, and somebody, a good buddy of mine, goes, dude, did you bring your freaking journal with you? Seriously? Did you bring your journal with you? You gotta be fucking kidding me, right? You didn't bring that. You're gonna write in that? I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, you write down like things. I go, yeah, dude, I brought it. Yeah. You know, at the time, so now I use like half the time I'm on my Evernote, you know, or my journal.
Sure.
And I'm like, yeah, I brought it. He's like, oh, all right. You know, he's like, but like, couldn't believe, you know, so it's just, and those little things that are just like,
sure,
it doesn't help, but you just let it, you know, it just rolls off. You learn to deal with things and you know what you're doing and you know what, and that's why I think actually having coaches and mentors are so important because they're on that same path. You're in surrounding yourself. I have a buddy that I'm actually pretty envious of. I should actually see if I can slide in on it or something. Every like month or 2 months, him and like 6 guys get together, just dudes, and they just talk about their feels. Yeah. They talk about their feelings, their relationships, their life, and they just, that's what they do. They don't drink and party. They just get together for a day.
That's fantastic.
Coffee and just talk about it. What's bothering them. They laugh, amazing. They cry. And I'm like,
are they local to here?
Fuck, I don't have that. Yeah, we're in Rochester. I'm thinking
if you get in, help me slide in.
All right, I will.
I mean, I've been out here for 5 years and I got a group of friends out here too. But yeah, I've always been curious. Like, I know that they're out there somewhere. Yeah. Guys that want to talk about this stuff. And I mean, my clients obviously do, and my coaches are similar. There's definitely humans that are into these types of conversations, but
totally
when you are location dependent on those people, like let's say we cut out the internet, I don't know if there's a lot of people in Rochester, New York, compared to a New York City or an LA or you know Scottsdale, Arizona or something where it seems like everybody's kind of walking that path.
Once you look though, there's a ton.
Sure.
I'm starting to learn that as I'm doing this local and international podcast, but I'm trying to do a lot of local stuff.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that because I was saying that to a client this morning in a little Marco Polo message. He was talking about how he was talking to a neighbor and his neighbor was trying to create some kind of business to impact people and stuff. And like, he was just so intrigued that like, oh wow, this guy's been living next to me. I had no idea that he would want to be a part of it. I'm like, yeah. And for me too, same thing with what you're saying. Like once you stop thinking that this conversation is weird and abnormal and you just believe that there's more humans that like to talk about this kind of stuff, that's when you'll start finding them. Because if you think that you're the unicorn, you're going to keep being the unicorn and everybody else is going to be different from that. But if you just kind of lean into the idea that like, oh, there are other people, you'll find them. And sometimes they live next door. Yeah. You know, it's something that I've had to wake up to too, because I think when I started the process, I could see, at least like in comparison, and you probably experienced the same thing, when you look at your friend group or you look at your, like all the people that you and your wife hang out with, like you're not
in family, right?
Because, right. Yeah. And you're not seeing anybody else that are doing like, so you feel like a unicorn.
Yeah.
And like, that's just because within your circle, maybe you were the only one or the first one that made the conscious choice to start shifting some stuff in your life. But there are plenty of people out there, whether they be next door, 5 miles away, 500 miles away, that like are all up in this stuff and are living really cool lives because they've decided to push away what they used to think was right and tried something new. And just believing that that's the case instead of being the unicorn type thing, you'll find more people. And I'm sure you continue to find more people every day that you want to interview on the podcast or, things like that, just because you've decided that like, oh, there's people out there that I want to talk to, and they keep showing up.
Yeah. And it's fun. It's a fun process. Once you actually let your heart get in it, let your soul, your mind, just every piece of you move forward and decide to get into that transformation or that awakening, whatever you want to call it, it becomes a really fun, interesting, sometimes hard process. Even meditating sometimes is like it's not just you sit down and you just close your eyes and you just hump your shoulders over and you don't think. I mean, you're actually working while you're meditating. Otherwise, you're not meditating. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Because the thought comes in, you have to let it
flow
flow itself out, and then come back to not thinking about it. And then, so it's a process. Sure. Life is a process.
I've heard that before. I tend to believe it. Yeah, I think that's probably true. It's definitely a process and an unfolding. And you're right. Like, there are parts of the process that aren't fun, and that's why so many people don't really stick with it. The whole self-evolution, working on yourself, trying to find the parts of you that you need to grow. Yeah, because there's parts of your old self that need to die. Like, there's your old story, the way that you used to think about things, the way that you used to. It's funny, like the episode that got released on our podcast, my buddy Julian Rosen and I have a podcast called The New School of Success. It's a shameless plug.
Yeah, New School of Success podcast. Check it out. It's Julian Rosen's. Just remember that thought.
Okay.
Give a little. Julian's
also a life coach. He's got this. His business is called the Fearless Life Project. He's really, like, I would say, for him, like, he's kind of a wizard of working through fear with people, like people that have fear of launching a business, fear of just kind of living life in a different way. Like, he kind of allows them to see that the fear is just a liar, and you're going to be okay, and you can go out and live the life you want. So that his approach is similar to mine, but his is kind of focused on like working through fear. Okay. Mine is, I'm kind of like the wizard of emotions with guys. Cool. So I work with guys on like, let's harness what you really want, which is love or freedom or whatever, and work on that every day rather than trying to work on a to-do list. Like, that's my wizardry, if you will. So him and I have known each other for 2 to 3 years, and we like would catch up on the phone like once a month, once every other month, and we'd just talk about real stuff. And I think that's cool. This past May or June, like, we're on the phone. I'm like, Julian, why don't we just start a podcast? Like, we sit on the phone every other month or so, and we yak for like an hour about really cool stuff. And I think a lot of people would enjoy hearing about this stuff, just for their own benefit of knowledge, but also like putting another voice or another idea to the podcast game, because it's always just him and I, and we're just kind of jamming on stuff. And sometimes we'll bring in guests to have a chat too, like some of our mentors and stuff. Yeah. We started the podcast, and it's been really, really fun because him and I are both kind of jokesters. So we're not taking this game of personal development so seriously that like you fall asleep while you're driving to work or whatever. Like, him and I went on this rant about, do you watch The Office? Oh yeah. Okay. Great show. So, Prison Mike from when he does I think it's in season 3, where he tries to pretend like he was in prison. He puts the bandana on and he does this whole like prison routine. So we riffed on Prison Mike today. The episode that dropped today, we riffed on that for like, I don't know, 3 to 5 minutes. Yeah. And it was the most fun. And then we like circle back to, whatever we were talking about. So it's like
did you actually play the clip in the scene? Okay.
No, because the reason that it came up, and this will actually bring me back to my original thought, was the episode is about how to, stay in your truth over the holiday season, because you're going to go back and see and be around family and friends and just circumstances that remind you of your old you. Mm-hmm. And so many of us, especially me, like, I have this tangible distance, like I was talking about, between where I grew up and where I am now. So I have this very clear separation in that sense. So when I go home and I visit my family and my friends, like my parents' house, my buddy's house, like the bars that we used to go to, these are all reminders of who I used to be. And it's so easy to slip back into that old me, or like say, I'm only home for 48 hours. Who cares if I just slip back into old Nick for a little bit, and I'll go back to Rochester and I'll be fine. So the whole episode is like how to stay out of that pattern of slipping back. I like that. Oneself, that's great. Right? But during the episode, Julian started speaking to me as if he was my Uncle Sale, in quotations, and using the Prison Mike accent. And halfway through the episode, he's like, I know where I got this accent from. It's Prison Mike. And then him and I just started talking about The Office for like 3 minutes.
I can't remember that episode. I have to check it out after this.
So funny. It's after they merged the two branches, and you find out that one of the accountants did time for embezzlement. So Michael Scott decides to dress up in what he would consider to be prisoner garb, and talks about what his experience was in prison. He's like, I'm Prison Mike, and the clink was so bad. And then he starts talking about the Dementors from Harry Potter. And he's like, the worst part about prison was the Dementors. It's just so, yes, it's in season 3. It's probably early on in season 3. Go watch it.
It's been a long time since I watched. My wife and I will just randomly watch episodes of that because it's just so good.
Yes, it's like quality background TV. Like my wife and I often fall asleep to it just because we can put it on. We know all the episodes. Nothing's going to surprise us, and we'll just kind of float off to sleep listening to Michael Scott be Michael Scott.
Does your wife, is she into personal development, the whole, all that stuff right now, or just kind of watching you go through that?
She's watching me go through it. Yeah. And, it's interesting. I think that this is probably something a lot of relationships go through as one person kind of like finds interest in this stuff, because, we're all different humans, even if we're living in the same spot.
100%.
So like, it was something for me. The reason I even got into it was when we got married, something clicked in me, and I was like, I'm a husband now. That's different. I want to be the best husband I can be. And when we have kids, be the best father I can be. And that just gave me this insatiable like itch. Like, I have to figure this out. So that kind of sent me down this rabbit hole. And here I am today, hopefully honoring that calling. And, for my wife, for her, it was like, she saw me doing that and was like, fear came up for her because she saw me growing and thought that meant I didn't want what I currently had. So it's been a lot of like sitting with and being patient with each other, because she sees me growing and doing different things that I used to do. And it kind of triggers like, oh, he's moving away from me in a sense. And me coming back to that conversation, like, no, I'm doing this all for you, and I need you to understand that. And like kind of swaying back and forth between that. So, we were actually talking about this in a general way last night, and she was like, I haven't grown like you've grown, and I've gotten a lot better at seeing where you're at and being okay with it and knowing that you're trying to run away from me. I'm like, you have grown though, just because you haven't read books and stuff. Like, you've been walking alongside with me, and you found patience and acceptance with all these crazy things that I want to do. Like, I wrote a book and I started a podcast, and like Nick from 5 years ago wouldn't want to do that. So I could understand how it might be a little triggering and worrisome for you, but you've grown in the sense that you have made peace with that, and know that, and know consciously that it's not about me trying to do something outside of this marriage or outside of this relationship. It's only to honor this. Like, her understanding that has been a process for her, and that's her own evolution. So, subconsciously, you might not even realize it, but she was probably is the inspiration, is a major inspiration for you. Yeah. Doing a lot of this stuff. So that is growth, right? I mean, she, having that, being part of that is a proof that somebody is, doing their thing and moving along. You become a mom. That's growth. I mean, you just I don't even, you don't read any books. If you become a mother and you have a child, there would be no kids in this world if guys had to give birth. There wouldn't. Right. There'd be out like your two sexual organ. Like, go ahead, have a baby.
Yeah, be pregnant for 9 months. Like, would be no children. Be sick. Like, no guys would want to go through that. So like, I think as men, we need to. And I'm not saying this just to like say it. I truly believe it. And definitely during my wife's first pregnancy, I didn't appreciate it enough. I'll be the first to admit that. You said you got married and you said, I want to be the best husband. That's amazing. Not a lot of guys do that, right? Yeah. I didn't do that. We just kept living our life. And I actually told my wife, I don't know, a year ago, why did you marry me? Like, what were you thinking? I was the guy that was known with no filter, right? I had no filter. Now this sounds cheesy, but I try to consciously all the time use my heart as a filter to what's coming out of my mouth.
Sure.
So before I decide to bust someone's chops or judge somebody, I try to filter it through my heart and then let it come out. Whereas before it was just like, blah, right?
Sure.
So that's amazing that you were you did that. And I hope anybody listening that's going to get married or thinking about getting married, be the best. If you're making that decision, consciously be the best husband that you could possibly be.
Sure.
If you have a kid, choose to be the best father that you could possibly be. So to go back, and I know you're on the same page with Nick as me with this, like women going through their pregnancy is such an incredible, hard, beautiful, amazing process that, you know, I wish I could go back and be like, all right, whatever you need. I mean, I was good, you know, I wanted to go times 10 now, whatever you need, whatever. So I'll be there. Let me know, because I do not want to go through what you're going through. And I really appreciate that you are going through this for us and the family.
Right.
If that's not growth in itself, that's probably more than you and I will ever do.
Right. Oh my God. I mean, to even add to that. So Christina, when we had Lucy, she used to work in school. She was like a student behavior assistant. So she would help kids with behavior issues. And we decided that when we started having kids that, you know, no matter the circumstance, she was going to stay home, because daycare and all of that, like, it just didn't make sense with our salaries. Like, it would just be a money pit for us. Like, it would just be easier for us to kind of pinch pennies a little bit, suck it in, and just kind of have her stay at home. She wanted that. Like, her mom was a stay-at-home mom. That was something she desired, right?
Okay.
And then, like, in the process of us, you know, starting the pregnancy, even before the pregnancy, really, she was like, okay, so how can I do this whole stay-at-home mom thing and still make some money? And that's where the business came from, because she had always been doing friends' makeup. Like, she would always kind of do friends of friends makeup for their wedding. She's like, I have this skill set. And if you look at the scope of things, weddings are traditionally on Saturdays. Nick's usually home on Saturdays. Yeah. So, like, I could go out and do wedding makeup on Saturdays, and that could be your day with Lucy. And that's, like, become our reality. So, yeah, my wife, for her to say, like, I haven't grown, like, you've created a child and you started this business,
amazing,
and you're rocking both of them. Like, who cares if you read a book or listened to a podcast or watched all the YouTube videos? It doesn't matter. Like, it's just a matter of, like, you know, she kind of called her shot. She's like, I'm going to start this business and I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom. And, like, yeah, awesome. And I did my best to support her throughout that process. But it's funny how, you know, she just looks at me. She's like, I haven't grown like you have, and it's hard for me to keep up. I'm like, you're crushing it. Like, don't you you get that?
And I think, totally. That's awesomely said. And I am with you 100%, because my wife and I have those conversations all the time about where we're at. You're never going to be on the same exact path or spot on the path as the person you're living with, or really almost anybody in life. You're all a little bit different. Right. Yeah,
we're all different humans, and something that I like talk to my clients about a lot, especially if they're married. Like, you're throwing two humans with their imperfections into this container where you're going to hang out with each other forever. If you think it's going to be all honky dory and rainbows and sunshine, you're sadly mistaken. And the only way you can kind of get to a place that kind of feels like that on a consistent basis is to address the places that are imperfect between the two of you and kind of talk about them openly. Because to think that you guys, you know, had this amazing wedding day and you were so in love on that day that it's just going to stay on autopilot in that state, it takes work. Now, it doesn't have to be, you know, the hardest thing in the world. I think a lot of people overstate how hard marriage is. Like, that makes it sound like a job. Yeah. It's just a matter of being conscious that, like, there's work to be done here. You're both imperfect. You need to work on yourselves. You need to communicate so that we understand where everybody's at. But yeah, when you toss two people into a room forever and you expect it to go just swimmingly, like, that's a poor expectation. So, like, you have to know that there's a need for being open with each other, knowing that you're never going to be the same person at the same time. So, you know, you're going to do something and she's going to see it differently, or I'm going to do something, my wife's going to see it or hear it differently. And like, to notice those subtle things where you kind of see that they're accepting or receiving what you're doing in a different way than maybe you're showing it, is like a skill set that is, if you hone it, like, that's going to make everything move and swim like that much better.
Definitely.
Because any amount of imperfect humans put in the same place for a long time, expect there is going to be some stuff you're going to have to work through.
And better to work through it quicker than let it fester and become worse and worse and worse. Right?
Yep. Or try to put a Band-Aid on it and find something else to fix it. Something that my most recent coach that I've had, Nick Tilia, has really hammered into my brain is cause versus effect, and how we are the cause. Like, we have more control than we think we do. And we think that by fixing the effects, fixing the circumstances around us, that's going to make things better. But that just kind of piles more crap on top of who we are choosing to be. So, like, if you're in a marriage for a long time and there's problems there, you think that by having another kid, obviously when you have another kid, there's a lot of love that is kind of incarnate in that process. You think that's going to dissolve all the stuff that you guys haven't worked through yet. You are sadly mistaken. You're trying to change the effect. You're trying to switch things out and circumstantially think that if we can fix those, that's going to fix everything. But really, to fix everything, you got to fix yourself and kind of really work through stuff for yourself. But also, as the core of the marriage, the two people that are there, you have to work through what has been bothering you. Like, I know of couples that just don't talk about it. We're just going to brush it under the rug. That rug is going to get really, really crowded over the course of a year. So, like, if something happens in the here and now and you're listening to this and you're like, I should probably tell my wife or my husband about that. Yes, you should.
Yeah.
And even if it's delivered in a poor way, even if it's said from a place of fear or scarcity or your ego versus theirs, it's better to put it out there and have that conversation and kind of work through it from a compassionate place rather than just, we'll talk about it in 10 years if it's still there. Because if it's still there in 10 years, it's going to be gross and ugly and not a fun conversation at all.
Yeah. A lot more work to work through.
Yes, exactly.
That's interesting. We go to couples therapy just to stay on top of stuff. I don't know if you guys have ever done that or into that, but
no, we've thought about it as more of like a proactive thing.
That's exactly. And that's where we're able to have the open conversations. And sometimes we go in and we just talk about all the good stuff. You know what I mean? Which I think is important too, rather than always just talking about the issues. It's obviously always talking about things that are great happening also. What do you, I have a question about you as a coach with men. What are the top, like, I don't want to say issues. What are the top feelings that, for example, myself, and I'm asking this out of, a selfish question because I'm really curious. I want to know. So for me, I literally had two emotions: happy or angry.
Okay.
There was, I don't, if it was sad, it was fake.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, this is the truth. And then happy was always just, you say something mean to me, I'm going to turn around, make a joke and laugh about it or have it happy, right? Or I'm going to get angry. That was it. Like if there was a conversation with my wife that she tried having with me, she's a yoga teacher. Okay. So she's gone through a lot of stuff with a lot of retreats and different things to help to grow herself and become more confident and everything else and personal development. And so she would try having conversations with me and I'd go right to anger. Like she's attacking me and all that. So my question is, and then I had to learn about my other emotions. So and I have still learning. And do you find that as a common thing with men is like, that's like anger and happiness and there's not much, or is it all over the board?
So, I mean, in terms of like emotional capacity, I think guys are just not well equipped. For the most part. The thing that I always say to the guys that I work with is like, physical maturity wasn't your choice. Like, you just grew up and your hair grew and your beard grew and you grew chest hair, whatever. Like, you didn't control that. It wasn't a conscious thing. They're like, all right, I'm going to grow more hair now. It's happening. You can't control it. But your emotional maturity is something that we have to be conscious of and like actually make choices about. And if you look at the programming of how men are supposed to be, if you look at how you were, I always come back to this like one moment in Little League, or maybe it wasn't even Little League, it was like high school baseball. I get beaned. And the first thing that I hear as soon as that happens, don't rub it, meaning don't show that it hurt. Don't show that you're in pain. Like, don't embrace the emotional response that's human. That's like, shit, that hurt. Like that is the programming that we get.
And you remember this happening.
Yeah. Like that's the programming that we get as boys, right?
Yeah.
Like it's suck it up. You're going to be okay. It's going to be all right. And anger is accepted because with sports, we have an outlet for anger, right? We have football fields, we have hockey rinks, we have places where we can express the anger in a way that seems normal. So that's not something that's shunned. happy obviously isn't shunned. So like, yeah, be happy all you want. And that's something that we kind of wedge ourselves into. Like, we have to be happy. We have to be happy. And something that I've really come to terms with is like, there's this huge gamut of emotions.
Yeah.
And life isn't about just getting to happy. It's about being present with and feeling all of them as they come up and being okay with that. And something that a lot of my clients struggle with is like, what about the quote unquote negative emotions? Like, do I want to spend time there? Is that what you're saying? I'm like, yeah, because when you can actually sit with an emotion and be present with it and not feel like you need to escape it in any way, that's going to be a skill set that you develop, so that when you do get to the fun emotions, when you have moments where you are genuinely happy and genuinely grateful and genuinely just in love with life, you won't have this urge to escape it. Because when you're on the negative side of the emotional scale, like if you're in grief, which, my wife and I lost our dog about a month-ish ago. And I knew that I needed to stay in, not in a way that I needed to just mope and be sad about our dog Maggie passing, but I knew if I tried to escape it to find something better, objectively better, that one, I wouldn't be honoring her time that we had with her. Yeah. And I also would be disregarding the skill set of sitting with the emotion and being present with it. So like, I sat with grief for a while, and I think I processed it a little bit faster than my wife did, and that's all fine and good, because like we said, imperfect people on different wavelengths, it's all good, like different mending processes. But I know that if I can spend time in grief and be there when I find happiness, when I find those beautiful moments with my daughter or my wife and I go out on a date night, like I won't have this weird subconscious thing that makes me think that I shouldn't be there. Because when we practice that at the negative level, and you're like, oh, I'm in grief, I need to escape. Yeah. Oh, I'm angry, I shouldn't be here. Or, oh, I'm frustrated or overwhelmed, I got to find happy again. And we're always trying to like push ourselves up the scale of emotion. When we get to the positive side of the emotion, we also now have this habit of like, this emotion needs to go somewhere. Like, I'm not allowed to sit here because, I need to be somewhere else. And so it's definitely something that a lot of the guys come to me with is something similar. Like, I don't know how to feel. What's emotions about? Like, I've been programmed differently. And of course you have, because that's general public, general culture. Guys aren't supposed to feel stuff.
And you help go through the process to break them open?
Yeah. So there's this emotional scale that I think Abraham Hicks came up with. I don't know if you're familiar with Abraham Hicks. It's this woman.
Should I be?
It's an interesting concept to explain out loud. That's why I'm smiling. So it's this woman named Esther Hicks who has like this being that comes through her that calls himself Abraham. So when she speaks, when she speaks to the audience, she is like, it's supposed to be Abraham talking to her. So all of the concepts that have been published as her, they call Abraham Hicks, like a combination of her and Abraham, whatever. So there's this list of emotions. I think there's 22 of them. And one of the big things that my guys and I talk about is, looking at this list, it's, at the top, it's like joy and gratitude and bliss. And towards the bottom, we got grief and depression. And how just being honest about where we're at is the start of the process of like figuring out how to work through it, rather than just saying like, oh, I need to be somewhere else. Like if you're frustrated, okay, here's where you're at on the list. I think frustrated is like 10. Instead of trying to jump from frustrated to joy and bliss, which would be like a 9 number gap. Think about like an actual ladder that you're trying to climb up. If you try to jump from the 9th rung or the 10th rung up to the top rung, you're going to hurt yourself, right? It's too far, physically incapable of doing that. Right. So emotionally, it's very similar. The way that I describe it is like, here's the scale of emotion. You're down here at like 10 or 15 and you're trying to jump to 2 or 1. Like, you're going to fall on your face and you're going to keep kind of coming back down to that lower rung because you're going to fall on.
But Nick, I'm an overachiever, man. I want to go from that to 1.
Well, the thing is like, of course we want to get there, but we can do so incrementally. So what I say to them is like,
that makes total sense.
Frustration is, let's say it's 10. Contentment is like 7. And I'll give you a very specific example of this. Like when Lucy, my daughter, was a newborn, she was colicky for like a good 2-3 months.
Fun.
That's fun. And I remember one night, I was trying to put her down. It was right before I was being coached. It was like an hour before this. And it was when I was working with my coach, Preston. And I got on the call afterward of trying to put her down. It was a frustrating experience. I was doing the whole dance and sway, trying to put her down and make sure that she stayed asleep, that whole thing. And I bring it up and I figure that he's just going to be, as a dad, like, oh, I get you. That's fine. And he kind of called me on it. And he's like, well, I just want to offer to you that you chose to be a dad, and this is part of the thing that you chose. I'm like, shit. So there was that.
Damn it, he's right.
So then he kind of brought up this scale to me, and this is kind of who I learned it from. He's like, so just name where you're at. I'm like, okay, I'm frustrated. Let's say it's number 10. He's like, okay.
So where you're at in that moment?
Yeah. So like
not in life in general.
Right.
Just
describing the situation
okay.
of Lucy not going to sleep as I had hoped. Let's say it's a 10. It's frustration.
Okay.
Right. He's like, okay, without anything changing, without any circumstance changing, Lucy's still going to be crying and it's still going to be this whole thing. What is an emotion that's like a few spots up from that? Not all the way to the top, just a few spots up from that you could be open to feeling within that same circumstance. So like number 7, I think, is contentment. And he's like, all right, so tell me what's different about feeling contentment versus frustration given the same circumstances. I'm like, well, if I'm in contentment and I'm just content with sitting and being there, I am aware that she's crying. That's still happening, but I'm content that she is crying because that returns back to me that she's my daughter and I have a kid and it's amazing. It's beautiful. And I can still, with her crying, find a different emotion that feels better than the frustration, right? So he kind of worked through this and we talked about it a bit. And so I kind of gradually kind of sank into this idea of being content no matter what. And it was crazy, but like that was the first night she slept for 12 hours. And I didn't go back and tell Lucy about what I experienced, right? Like I didn't go and say, hey, Lucy, I'm content now, just so you know. But like I got off the call just feeling a little bit lighter. And wouldn't you know it, she slept for 12 hours. And old Nick probably would have been like, just got lucky. But new Nick is like, something shifted within me.
The energy in the room.
Maybe allowed Lucy to feel my tension release, allow her tension to release. And I mean, she's been sleeping 12 plus hours a night ever since. So, so that's kind of the work that I do with the guys that I have. Like if they're having some kind of resistance or some kind of emotion that they don't enjoy, whether it be anger, sadness, grief, depression, I'm like, all right, let's call it something. And then let's talk about, without changing any circumstances, what does the next couple rungs up on that ladder feel like? And how can we say that that's better than where you're at right now? Because the more you do 2-3 steps at a time up this little ladder, eventually you'll find your way back up to joy and gratitude and all that stuff. It's just that when you try to jump from depressed to ecstatic, your body, your nervous system's like, what are you doing? We were upset just 3 minutes ago.
I've never heard it put that way. I've never heard of that. It's really cool. That's awesome. So I gotta look at that. I gotta look into that. That's cool.
Just Google Abraham Hicks emotional ladder.
I almost feel like I should know what that.
No, man, I didn't know about it until like 2 years ago, and it's transformed me because I'm able to use it, but it also has helped me help other guys in a way that I didn't beforehand because it was a different tool that makes it tangible, right? Like I could easily say, okay, you're frustrated. Let's feel better about that.
Right.
Like, if I'm speaking to that too generally, nobody's going to want to sit with that conversation. But if you have something that like, all right, let's move 2 spots up. What does that feel like? How is this different?
Cool.
It just makes it a little bit more practical.
Have you taken a little bit from each coach and kind of put it into your own program too, along with your own stuff? Because that's what I mean, if I was to do it, that's kind of how I would work, is take some pieces from other things that would work for me, things that had worked for me, and then kind of combine it all. Is that? Yeah.
It's been kind of a combination of like what speaks through me,
right,
from my heart, like what makes sense to me without anybody else's input. And then like, every single coach has some kind of like something that they taught me as a part of who I am as a coach, right? Awesome. Like so with Tommy, the first guy that I had, who kind of drilled the morning routine to me. Now, like with my guys, the morning routine is not as like, hey, you get up at 5 a.m. type thing, because most of the guys that I work with are husbands or fathers. Like getting up at 4:30 or 5 a.m. may not be realistic right now, but let's get up a half hour earlier than we used to and do the bare, like find with one client, I'm like, all right, so there's 6 things that you used to do. And because you don't do all 6, you feel less than. So what are the non-negotiables that we can now just say, every morning I'm going to do this no matter what. Yeah. And if I have time to read or meditate or whatever, I'll do that next. Because it's a different way of looking at it. Because the client I'm thinking of, he used to crush his morning routine. And when it stopped, when life kind of came at him and he stopped, he just felt like a piece of crap. Yeah. And it made it very, very hard for him to dive back into this thing that was very useful to him. So I was like, listen, man, when Lucy came along, I was the same way. Like I had this morning routine. It was rock solid. I was doing this stuff for myself every morning. It was amazing. And then, my 4 a.m. wake up call was now a girl that needed a bottle, right? It was different. And you have to kind of evolve with how your life is changing. So, that morning routine piece that Tommy taught me in my programs, it's like, all right, let's pick 1 to 2 things that you can do for yourself before everybody else wakes up. Now, do you want to get up earlier than that and do more? Cool. That's fine. But I want, like, bare minimum, what's the 1 to 2 things that are going to fill you up before you go into your day?
That's also,
yeah.
That's exactly what I had to learn myself.
Sure.
What are 2 things for you that you have to do, even if you get a 4 a.m. wake up call or whatever, between the morning sometime?
So for me, meditation is like number 1. Got to have some form of meditation, whether it's 5, 10, hour, doesn't matter. I need something, because it just allows me to have some space away from my circumstances. My reality allows me to kind of dream bigger than I would have had I been just sitting in my chair, not cutting away from my circumstances. So I need some meditation. Exercise is a big thing for me. I would say I exercise 5 to 6 days a week. So that's, I've got this routine down now that Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday's the gym, and Wednesday's a yoga day. Saturday's kind of, dealer's choice. I can do whatever I want because Saturday's that daddy-daughter day that I was mentioning. So usually during Lucy's nap time, I'll either like find a YouTube video that's like a 20-minute HIIT workout, or I'll do some yoga again.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's usually meditation and exercise. And after that, the wiggle room becomes, do I have time to read? Cool. Let's read. Do I have time to write something? Cool. Let's write. Because when I wrote my book, that's kind of the time that I used to write my book was 4:30 to 5. It was always, it was a early morning session.
What time do you go to bed?
That's something I could probably improve. It's usually around 10 o'clock.
Oh, that's.
It's still only six-ish hours, right?
Yeah.
From 10 to 4:30. So
I was just I was listening to a podcast with my wife. This is a really cool podcast called Science versus whatever. And they talk about different things and sleep. I listened to the sleep one.
Oh, okay.
And they did all these tests. I won't elaborate too much on it, but I was getting 6 to 7 hours of sleep when I woke up at 5, right?
Yeah.
And they did all these like scientific tests that at 6 hours of sleep for like 97% of humans, your reaction time is worse than if you were buzzed from drinking.
Oh, wow.
And they did it by, you look at the screen and they press a space bar.
Sure.
And the reaction time for like everybody was less when they pounded like 3 beers in a half hour.
Okay.
It was funny, listen.
Sure.
And then they did the test.
Yeah.
And then they also did it where and that was a full night's sleep, 8 hours, 9 hours. And then they did it on 6 hours of sleep.
Sure.
And they did the test, and every person's reaction time was less on the 6 hours of sleep.
So they were faster?
They were fast. No, they were faster when they were buzzed.
When they were buzzed.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what the point of it was, how important sleep is
Sure.
for us. And 7 hours seems to be that number.
Okay.
And the time of midnight to 5 a.m., that's when like your circadian clock and rhythm, I don't know too much. That's when everything's happening in your body that you need to get. It was a really interesting podcast.
Yeah.
And then when you're really tired and you kind of feel zombie-like,
Yeah.
they figured out that there's actually parts of your brain that fall asleep, that are sleeping.
Okay.
So that's why you're not able to comprehend as much. That's why you're not able to pay attention as much, because it's not because you're groggy. It's because your brain has fallen asleep, different pieces of it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was really interesting. So now I'm like making sure no matter what, I'm getting 7 hours of sleep. I try to get 8 now, where before I'm like, I read Hal Elrod's, which is a great book, Morning Miracle.
Yeah.
And they're like, if you got to get 4 hours, whatever, just make sure you get that morning routine in, make sure you're going in. And now it's like, no, I need to get 7, 8 hours.
Right.
So I need to go to bed at 9:30 maybe.
Yeah.
Or 10.
Now, I think I've also found too, like to that point and to other things, I think a lot of stuff that is true about personal growth and like learning about yourself and evolving is paradoxical. So like Hal Elrod's book, obviously very powerful, The Morning Routine. He's like, I don't care if you have 4 or 5 hours, that morning routine is very important.
Yeah.
And then there's this scientific side, like saying, well, science is saying you need more sleep. So it's kind of, they're in argument with each other, these two concepts, but they're both very powerful. So
Right.
like if you can balance them and find a way to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep and have this amazing morning routine, like, cool, that's where the sweet spot is.
That's where the sweet spot
Or like having a little bit of both and understanding that even though they're in conflict of each other, they're both important to hear. And like that's true for a ton of stuff, like mindfulness and meditation and all of that versus action. Like you can't go all action because all action is going to burn you out. You can't be all meditation because you're not going to do anything. Like you have to do a little bit of both and understand that although these two things are opposite of each other, if you pair them together and let them dance together, they can be powerful.
Yeah.
Like I feel like there's so many people that get stuck in, well, this thing that seems to be right and this other thing that seems to be right are opposite of each other. So I'm going to do neither of them. Like, well, no, they do both. Like make them weave together in whatever way feels right for you and is subjective to you. Because I mean, it all has to work for you in a way that challenges you still. Like you can't just, chalk it up to like, oh, well, I'm a dad or, I have a business or whatever, so I can't get up that early. Like that's probably a story saying you can't get up that early. You can find a way to do it, but like making sure that it is sustainable for you and not something that you are trying to cram into your life so that, eventually creates this amazing, amazing thing. Like find a way that it works for you, but also challenges you in some way, knowing that sometimes those concepts that feel like they're right might be opposite of each other, and
right.
Just finding a way to weave them together and make them work for you however they seem to make that sense to you, then I think it's super critical.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. That was good. That was well said.
Thank you.
And probably a good way to end this. I do want to finish with one question.
Okay.
And I've been trying to think of a good question to kind of end a podcast with, because all my episodes we've just, gone and said, hey, thank you. Have a great day.
Sure.
So, I figure since it's a mindfulness, podcast, Mindful Impact, if there was something that you could go back and tell your 18-year-old self, I know this question is cliche, but I think when it comes to the people I'm interviewing and talking to on this Mindful Impact podcast, there might be some interesting perspectives that I'm curious to see.
Sure.
What was one thing that now that you would tell that person?
So true to what I was just saying, this is very paradoxical in the way that I would want to respond to this. Like there's a part of me that says, don't change a thing. Life is amazing now. And it's only a result of you doing everything the same way that you did it. Right. So there's that part of me. But there's also a part of me that wants to go and speak to my 18-year-old self and shake him and be like, listen, man, there's some things that you can learn by doing it now rather than waiting until you're 24 to start doing them.
Yeah.
So I'll ignore the one that just says, keep it the way that it is.
Thank you.
Because obviously that
it's not allowed on this podcast.
That would disregard your question and say like, you know what, Justin, screw your question. So if I had to go back to 18-year-old Nick and say something to him, I would probably encourage him to read and just absorb information and
I like that.
And let that be a space of learning. And I know like 18 years old, you're going into college and trying to figure all this out. Like, yeah, I went to school for teaching, and obviously it was valuable because I've been teaching now for 10 years and like it paid off to a certain extent. Like I have a career, right? But there are just so many things about how to live life that I was ignorant to because, limited life experience, but also, and this is true for a lot of humans, we just assume that whatever we grew up with or whatever we were told or whatever we've seen in the world so far is truth, right? And by reading and listening to podcasts or watching YouTube videos, you get a little taste of what other people experience, and it kind of allows you to kick the legs out of the table that you've been kind of eating off of, so to speak. And, I know that my parents did the absolute best that they could, and I love them for that. But I also know that they're imperfect humans, just like we are.
Yeah.
And so in them trying their best, maybe there were some gray areas that maybe they didn't understand that would be powerful and important for 18-year-old Nick to know about.
18-year-old stubborn Nick that as a male would probably like, I know everything. I'm not going to, so even if they wanted to tell us something, they probably couldn't even have told us anything.
Right. But it's just it's been the most eye-opening thing for me as I've done this whole process of working on myself is allowing other ideas that weren't similar to what I've known to infiltrate my system and just see if they're true. Because something that my one coach, Preston, loved to say was like, just try it on like it's a sweater. Try on this idea like it's a sweater. You can take it off if you want to, but just try it on. Because, 18-year-old Nick probably thought that he knew a lot. And so does 31-year-old Nick. He probably thinks that he knows a lot. And I think I know a fair amount more than 18-year-old Nick.
Sure.
But, I mean,
there's a lot of sweaters left to try on.
There's a lot of sweaters left to try on, especially in this freezing cold weather. So yes, 18-year-old Nick, read more, absorb more information, be okay with it not being the same as what, mom and dad taught you or what you saw from your brother and sister or what you saw in high school baseball, hockey, and all that stuff. Like there's so much more truth that doesn't have to make what I grew up with wrong, it just adds to it, right? Like it's so many people are just scared to hear other ideas because they feel like that would take away from what they already know or what they believe, you know. It can just add to it. It becomes
the ego,
this
right?
melting pot of, it is the ego for sure. It's just this melting pot of like, oh, this new idea came into what I believe to be true. That's neat. Like, you know, I was telling somebody the other day that, you know, I grew up and my parents are still married. They're awesome humans, love their relationship, love experiencing that through them. But I also know that I subconsciously chose this life in terms of having a wife and a kid because I saw that, right? And that's a beautiful gift that I saw subconsciously, like wanting to do that. But there's so many people that have subconscious things that they've experienced that they don't know that they're choosing them because of that. Like whether it be like the way that they view money or the way that they view relationships or the way that they view how to start a business or entrepreneurship or anything like that. Because their old truth is just this computer program that's been stored in their brain when they were 8 years old, and they have no idea that there's more out there. So 18-year-old Nick, your computer program needs to be a little bit disassembled and reassembled with some new information. Read some stuff, listen to some podcasts, and maybe someday you'll have a podcast too, fella.
There you go. Perfect. Thanks. Is there anything you want to plug?
Let's see, plugs.
Do it.
The New School of Success. We release episodes every Monday and Wednesday. Monday, it's myself and my buddy Julian just jamming and talking about Michael Scott, but also really cool stuff too. And then Wednesdays are mini-sodes, so it's just one of us talking about like 5 to 7 minutes of really cool, like powerful truth that we like to throw out there every Wednesday. So there's that. The book, Moving Past Mediocre. I put a lot into that. It's a lot of like little stories about me too. So like you'll learn about me and you'll probably think you know who I am by the time that story is done. But I really, really love the way that turned out and the response that's gotten.
Right on Amazon, Moving Past Mediocre.
Yes, so go find that on Amazon. And I think those are the only two main plugs that I have. But just find me on social, friend me, like all the stuff that I put out. Be nice to me. I always joke about this on our podcast. Like, if there's something that came up with what Justin and I talked about today, message us. Like there was this part of me when I was getting into this whole game, like I wouldn't message people that are on podcasts because I felt like they were different and separate than me. Like, oh, they know more than me and they're not going to, view this message as worthy of responding to. Like now that I'm on the other side of that, like I'm a human and you're a human and the people that would message us are human. So, hey, let's have a conversation. And
we want to be messaged.
Right.
We do.
shoot us a message. Ask us what you thought or like if you have any questions, like that's what those messages are for, not for harassing people about your side business that nobody wants to hear about. Shade thrown. All right. So
thanks, Nick.
You're welcome.